Ground Zero in New York. The president going there to lay a wreath at the National 9/11 Memorial and to visit with 9/11 families. Hope to see you then. That's all for us tonight in the arena right now.
Good evening, I'm Elliot Spitzer. Welcome to the program. Tonight, show us a body. That is the cry from angry crowds in Pakistan. They're demanding proof that Osama bin Laden is really dead. In the streets of Abbottabad, the city where Obama died, protesters are saying it's all an American lie. Hard to believe. More on this in a moment. But first, a look at what we're digging into on tonight's program. We're a nation of laws, but did we assassinate bin Laden? Settling a score or a violation of principles? And conspiracy theories. Some people say bin Laden's still alive. Is Osama the next Elvis? The sightings have already started. Then,
America's elite anti-terrorist commandos.
SEAL Team 6.
Sleep tight, sucker.
No, not a Chuck Norris movie. The guys that shot bin Laden. But Edie Hill has been digging, and she says they may have had some help. Stay tuned. Now, more on our top story tonight. I want to show you more video shot on the streets of Pakistan today. You see those people holding a banner. It's written in Urdu, but here's the translation. Osama is alive. They're burning U.S. flags, calling Americans dogs, and doubting Osama bin Laden is dead. Let's go live to Abbottabad, Pakistan now, where we're joined by CNN senior international correspondent Nick Robertson. Nick, tell me about those protests and who is leading them.
Well, it's lawyers here, amazingly enough, in this city who are protesting. I spoke to the president of the Bar Association here today. He said 400 to 500 lawyers came out protesting what they called an American attack on the compound. I asked him about this. He said they don't believe that bin Laden was living here, that they believe that this operation was all to bolster President Obama's chances of re-election next year. And he says he doesn't believe his own government as well. He thinks that the politicians here in Pakistan are also using this situation to further their own political advantages. So you have this sort of influential, intellectual group in this city who are saying unless they get a photograph, they won't believe that bin Laden's dead. And they actually want more than a photograph. They want the people in the Pakistani government custody, the other family members, the wife, the daughter of bin Laden, to be shown publicly and to hear them saying, yes, bin Laden actually lived here. Elliot?
And Nick, give us a sense. You were there, of course. All we see is some of the TV footage. Are these protests gaining traction? Are the crowds growing? Is this a growing movement day by day?
This is what the government here is worried about, but for every lawyer that you see on the streets here, there are others who are not protesting. There are others who are happy that bin Laden is dead. His neighbors are happy that he's gone. They don't want somebody like that on their doorstep. They know what he brings to this country. Thousands of Pakistanis have been killed over recent years because of Taliban and al-Qaeda attacks here, and people want a better life. They want improved economy, improved security. I talked to a doctor here, and he said, look, let's put this behind us. Let's build a good relationship with the United States. They're funding a lot of our schools here. Let's have more of that. Let's use this to improve the lives of people in Pakistan. So, yes, the government worries that the sort of angry element will gain traction. But for all of those you see on the streets, there are plenty of others here who just want a better life, Elliot.
Nick, finally, what, if anything, has been heard from al-Qaeda? Is there any voice? Is there any formal response? The members of al-Qaeda who are still there saying, we're ready to fight, or are they back on their heels, recognizing not only that their leader has been killed, but also that the United States now has a treasure trove of information about them? What, if anything, is the sense on the street about al-Qaeda?
Well, we know that these groups, these al-Qaeda followers, like to chat on some sort of jihadist forums, and there's mixed messages. Some are saying, if you've got an attack ready, do it now. Others are saying, no, we need to strike big, let's plan our attacks. And others are saying, let's wait, let's see what comes out, let's see what the Americans are getting here. But interestingly, it seems to be the jihadists are the ones that are accepting at the moment, in some part, that bin Laden is dead. I spoke to a radical Islamist in London, a man you've interviewed on your show, Elliot, Amjad Chowdhury. He told me is planning a protest in London, but he also told me that he believes, and we know what kind of a rabble-rouser he is, he believes that bin Laden is dead. Elliot?
All right, Nick, thanks so much. You're right. Chowdhury is always planning a protest. It seems to be the only thing he can do. All right, Nick, thanks so much. We'll be checking back with you later on. So why did President Obama decide that the world should not see the picture of a dead Osama bin Laden? He explained his reasons in an interview with CBS. Take a listen.
There is no doubt that we killed Osama bin Laden. It is important for us to make sure that very graphic photos of somebody who was shot in the head are not floating around as an incitement to additional violence, as a propaganda tool. That's not who we are.
Propaganda tool or not, should the photos have been released? I want to welcome back to the show two voices from the Islamic community. Mona El-Tahawi is a columnist. She's joining me from Washington. And Hiba Ahmed is a writer for the blog Muslim Matters. She's in Albuquerque tonight. Welcome to you both. And I just want to start with Hiba. Hiba, you are a devout Muslim, as I think most people can see by your dress tonight. You're wearing a niqab, and I just want folks to understand that. Let me begin with you. Should the photos of a dead Osama bin Laden be released to the world so there's absolutely no dispute that he has met his maker?
Thank you for having me on the show. I want to start out by saying, and I think Mona and I would both agree on this, that Osama bin Laden and his ideology is an extremism that does not represent Islam and does not represent the majority of peace-loving Muslims. And with that being said, I think that this issue is a little bit complicated because I think you have to weigh the pros and cons of releasing or not releasing. Hindsight is 20/20, and we unfortunately don't have that benefit. So I have to say that I do agree with our president that I think that the negative outcome could actually outweigh the positive. I think that personally these are going to be gory and gruesome pictures which I have no desire to see, nor do I want my children or other people's children to see all over the internet. What I'm really afraid of is these people that sympathize with with bin Laden, to put up banners with pictures of his dead body and use that to rally more people around him. And I think that...
Let me interrupt for a moment, only so I can give Mona a chance to jump in on this. And let me argue the other side for a moment. As you just heard, if you were able to hear the prior segment, there seems to be a growing movement in Pakistan, at least, that doubts that, in fact, bin Laden is dead. Would not these photos resolve that issue and put to rest with finality and make it clear that the leader of al-Qaeda is gone and finished? Mona, what do you think?
Right. I have to say that that movement, I mean, the images that you showed in Pakistan represent a tiny minority of Pakistanis and Muslims, because the majority of Muslims I know detested Osama bin Laden and what he represented and the way that he hijacked our religion and the way that he distorted everything that Islam represents and that we're proud of. I supported releasing the pictures because of the conspiracy theories. There are some conspiracists, of course, who will never be satisfied with any kind of proof. I have to add, though, that I don't know how much of his face is left to prove that it is him who is dead when the pictures are released. But you have to remember that many people across the world distrust everything the US administration says. And unless some kind of proof is presented, they will distrust it even more, especially because the story of the raid itself is beginning to change already. So I would have supported it. And remember that we see gruesome pictures all the time. We're seeing terribly gruesome pictures of what the Assad regime is doing to Syrian revolutionaries. We're seeing horrendous pictures of what the Gaddafi regime is doing to Libyan revolutionaries. So I think people can make the choice for themselves, but I think because there's so much mistrust, the US administration should have released the pictures.
But what do you say to that? That we need to do something demonstrative, something tangible, something that is akin to what people ordinarily see on a TV show to prove the case. You know, we're used to this, what I call TV-level proof now. I used to be a prosecutor, and we're used to having crimes solved with something you can look at, touch, feel, smell. Don't the folks in Pakistan who may be skeptics, they may be irrational, but don't they need to see something that is indisputable, such as a picture, such as a DNA sample? How do you respond to that?
I think Mona brings up many good points, and I'm actually conflicted over this issue, but I don't think that a picture of a man who's had multiple head wounds is going to be undisputable fact. I think that in the age of Photoshop and the age of, airbrushing, that it's not going to quell any conspiracy theories. If anything, I think that it's just going to produce more, yet they're going to have images in their hand to use for their recruitment. I think that people are going to continue to believe what they believe. Some people think he's been dead for a long time and that they just chose now to say it. So I really think that the harm outweighs the good in this, and I think that our president knows the national security issues, and if he weighed it and he thinks that it could violate and harm our national security, that we need to trust him.
Mona Hibbis said something interesting a few moments ago. She said she thought the ideology of Osama bin Laden itself was dead. That ideology had run its course. It was no longer a persuasive argument to either the children or whatever generation may have listened to it over the past couple years. Do you agree with that? Do you think that his ideology is just finished and is now ready to be thrown in the scrap heap of history?
Oh, absolutely. It has been for a while, Elliot. I think bin Laden's physical death came several years after his symbolic death. Mostly because I think many Muslims around the world realize that his nihilistic violence has done nothing but kill thousands of Muslims around the world, make the lives of Muslims around the world, especially in this country, hell, with profiling and the war on terror. And between bin Laden and George Bush, Muslim lives in many countries have been turned into hell. And I also think that, you know, with the increasing uprisings and revolutions across the Middle East and North Africa, young people now, Muslim and non-Muslim, have a new model for change, that we can bring about change in the way that Egyptians brought about change peacefully. We don't need to even consider this nihilistic violence. I think for the majority of Muslims around the world, bin Laden represented a terrible distortion of our religion, and many people, many, much more than those you saw in those images in Pakistan, are relieved that he's dead. There's a big difference between celebrating and relief, and most of us, and I have to add that every single major Islamic group in North America has released a statement saying we are relieved that bin Laden is dead. Good riddance, essentially.
But let me pick up on something Mona just said. Do you agree not only with the notion that the ideology is dead, but that what we are seeing in North Africa, in the Middle East, the revolutions that have swept that region, are they an affirmative response to bin Laden, saying, no, we believe in freedom, tolerance, something other than the violence of bin Laden?
Yes, I think that Mona is exactly right. I do believe that Osama bin Laden and his ideology have been long marginalized in the Muslim and Arab world. And I think that here in the United States, we give him much more importance than over there. I think that it's ironic that his death comes at the time when the Muslim countries are showing peaceful pro-democracy movements coming about. And I think that I hope that the victims of 9/11 and all of us who were traumatized by what happened on 9/11 can finally get closure, close this chapter in our life, and move on to something new, something where we all join the human family, we build bridges, we learn to know each other, and we go based on tolerance and knowledge instead of fear and this black and white us versus them.
Mona, we only have a brief time left. How did you respond to the joy that was expressed in the streets, the sort of flag waving, the cheers, the adulation down at Ground Zero Sunday night when it was announced that bin Laden was dead? Did that bother you in any sense? Did you think this is an affirmation of all that we believe in here?
Well, you know, I went to Ground Zero soon after President Obama spoke because I wanted to pay respect to the thousands of people who lost their lives both at Ground Zero, in other places in the U.S., Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in D.C., but also to victims of the war on terror across the world. And I went there to say a prayer. I said the first chapter of the Quran there, Al-Fatiha, at Ground Zero for everyone who's lost their lives. But what I found there, Elliot, really dismayed me. It was basically a frat boy party that was a parody of Team America, the film which itself was a parody of George Bush's gung-ho American nationalism and exceptionalism. You know, people were cursing, using curse words before Osama bin Laden's name. I don't care about him, good riddance to him. But, you know, it was like the Super Bowl. They were chanting, ole, 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 at a place that is supposed to be hallowed ground. And where Muslims, remember last year, Muslims were told, you cannot build the Islamic Community Center 2 blocks away because this is hallowed ground, and yet they're on hallowed ground with these young people, you know, chanting ole, 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 and using these awful words in a place where we should be paying respect. So I was really dismayed, and America is better than this. It doesn't have to be this kind of triumphalism. We can say we're glad that Osama bin Laden is dead, but we should remember the thousands killed both here, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other countries that have suffered from both bin Laden and George Bush's war on terror, which I hope President Obama ends, because it's time to close Guantanamo, and it's time to stop committing these injustices that we should be better than, because we must not descend to the levels that bin Laden took us to.
Can I jump in here?
Hiba, absolutely. I was just going to say, before you do so, Mona, you raised a host of issues there that maybe we can visit some other day from Guantanamo on down. But Hiba, respond, if you would, to how you reacted to what you saw at Ground Zero, either by being there or more likely, given that you're in Albuquerque, to watching it on TV.
I have to say that when 9/11 happened, when I saw these scenes of Muslims celebrating in the street, it was so horrific to me, and it was completely distasteful. And I think that, like Mona said, Americans are better than this. We need to take a higher moral ground. We need to not celebrate death in this way and instead show people that we are humbled by these actions, that we are reflective, and that we decide to take a different path than our enemies.
Well, let me disagree with both of you just a little bit on this one. I hear the sentiment you're expressing, and you're both so articulate and persuasive. Having said that, this was a moment of joy that somebody who committed among the most vile acts in our history had finally paid a price and been captured and was no longer in a position to perpetrate more acts. And I think that was the outpouring of joy and satisfaction. It was not a death as much as it was that we who believe in tolerance, freedom, and justice had reigned supreme. And I think that's the way I view it, and that's why I sympathized and supported those. Not every word uttered, of course, but the sentiment down there at Ground Zero. Anyway, Hiba, Mona, thank you for a fascinating conversation. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now, Edie Hill joins me to tell us what she's been working on. Edie?
You're going to love this. The guy who created SEAL Team 6 is going to join us, and he's going to tell us the critical reason why, even though the military was relaying the details of the mission to the president, they weren't running the show. The military was not running it. Why was that so important? Who was?
Let me tell you, a guy who created SEAL Team 6, probably the toughest guy in the world. He could probably eat nails for breakfast.
And he looks that way, too.
He looks that way, too. All right, thanks, Edie. Coming up, did U.S. forces violate international law when they killed an unarmed bin Laden? A debate on American assassination when we return.
This was President Obama encouraging Brazil to drill for oil.
Brazil wants to be a major supplier of new, stable sources of energy. The United States wants to be a major customer.
But what about here at home? You're paying more at the pump. But Obama and his allies in Congress support new energy taxes that would drive up prices even more. And the administration has banned production on most American oil and gas, costing the U.S. billions and making us more dependent on foreign oil. Tell President Obama, no new energy taxes.
Could switching to Geico really save you 15% or more on car insurance? Is the pen mightier than the sword?
Yo.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Thousands of foreclosed homes are up for bid now. Visit RealtyBid.com for unbelievable home discounts. These distressed properties must be sold. Go to RealtyBid.com now. Only a few days remain to bid. RealtyBid.com, where America shops for foreclosures.
New information tonight coming out of Pakistan about what U.S. officials found in Osama bin Laden's compound. Bin Laden was carrying 500 euros, which is about $745. Not sure that would have gotten him very far. And he also had 2 phone numbers sewn into his clothing when he was killed. No doubt those numbers have been called by now. In addition, there were about 5 cell phones and 5 guns, including pistols and AK-47s. Here with more about the location of the compound, Tom Foreman at the data wall in our D.C. bureau. Tom, what can you show us?
Hey, Elliot, this is really interesting to look at these new images from GOI. Here's Africa down here. We move across the Arabian Sea up here toward our target area. We've made a big fuss about the notion that Islamabad is down here, only about 30 miles away from Abbottabad, where this was found. The whole notion was it's very close. But the truth is we're finding out a lot more about how other people were even closer. This is where the compound is over here. Over here is this Pakistani military academy, where in 2008, our own troops were busy training Pakistanis to handle problems in the rest of their country with various terrorist cells, groups that were opposing them there. From this military academy over here to the compound is only about 750 yards. So we actually had troops on the ground within a few football fields of being where Osama bin Laden was believed to be at the time. That's kind of surprising. You move in even closer, though, and there's some other things we're finding out. If we move into this, I want you to take a look at this area right here. These are roadblocks that have been identified by the GOI analysts as they've looked at these photographs. We don't really know how long these have been here, whether or not this had anything to do with stopping people coming into the compound up here, but obviously that's one of the concerns. But now, here's the part I really want you to look at. Here's the compound up here, and if I just fade it in, you can see the latest image, and look right down here. That dark spot that appears right there, That is the downed helicopter that we've heard so much about. We know that it was some type of a Black Hawk helicopter, but there's been a lot of attention from intelligence sources as they've looked at this, people around the world who pay attention to this. As they've looked at the wreckage, they've noticed some unusual things about this, Elliot, and I want you to come in very close on this next picture. This picture, look at the tail rotor on this. You don't have to see a whole lot of helicopters to recognize that this looks somewhat different than what we've seen before. What that has intelligence folks around the world thinking, as our own Barbara Starr reported earlier from the Pentagon, is that maybe these were some type of stealth helicopters with the same kind of technology that hides them from radar, because one of the big questions is, why did the Pakistanis not see these helicopters coming in to launch this raid? Nonetheless, that's one of the big questions that is being asked now as people sort through how they came in, hit this compound, and got out the way they did. In any event, Elliot, these new pictures from GOI and all the new information you reported a minute ago really helping day by day to paint a bigger, more complex picture of what actually went on inside this house.
Tom, fascinating stuff, amazing footage and photos, but I got to tell you, at the beginning of your little talk to us here, when you said it was 750 yards on the map between the military school, the Pakistani military school, and the compound, that is unbelievable. There's absolutely no way I would take any bet, any odds. The intelligence service in Pakistan knew he was there. They had to. They must have. They're part of it. Game over. This is not even in dispute. You look at this map, it's just incredible.
Yeah, and this area, I'll tell you this also, Elliot, the military people aren't here confined to this area. There's a lot of movement all throughout this area, so that's why I think a lot of people are saying that. I mean, for crying out loud, there's a golf course not far from here. So the truth is, you got a lot of people moving around here. That's one of the reasons that people keep looking at just the geography alone and saying, you didn't know? How's that possible?
All right, Tom, thank you. You know, as I said the other day, you put up an 18-foot wall with barbed wire on top of it. Immediately, people are saying, what's on the other side? That is not how you guarantee anonymity. All right, Tom, thanks so much for that fascinating stuff.
Good seeing you.
Americans are celebrating the killing of Osama bin Laden, but what was the operation's legal authority under U.S. and international law? Attorney General Eric Holder thinks he had it. Here's what he told the Senate Judiciary Committee today.
Let me make something very clear. The operation in which Osama bin Laden was killed was lawful. He was the head of Al-Qaeda, an organization that had conducted the attacks of September the 11th. He admitted his involvement. As you indicate, he said he would not be taken alive. The operation against bin Laden was justified as an act of national self-defense.
But does that settle the issue? Joining me now are Walter Dellinger, who was Solicitor General under the Bill Clinton administration, represented the U.S. government before the Supreme Court. Walter is thought to be one of the most brilliant constitutional lawyers out there. Also, senior analyst David Gergen. David, you've been there in the Oval Office as these sensitive decisions were being made. Walter, let me begin with you. Assassination is illegal under U.S. law. So how do we justify going in with all these troops and killing Osama bin Laden?
Well, first of all, assassination has been prohibited by a presidential executive order. A president can amend an executive order at any time. But this is not an assassination because it's conducted as part of an operation of military combat. As a matter of U.S. law, the authorization for the use of military force enacted after 9/11, which gives the president the authority to use force that he deems reasonable to go against those that were behind 9/11, clearly applies to bin Laden. So there's no question about its lawfulness under U.S. law. Under international law, bin Laden is an enemy combatant, and one of the points of war is that you can kill enemy combatants. Now, if they've surrendered and ceased being a combatant, then you have to take them into custody. But you have no obligation to make it easy for someone to surrender. Even the more restrictive view, Elliot, that some European nations hold, that you have to take steps that will not compromise your mission in order to take someone into custody rather than kill them when they're an enemy combatant. That standard is easily met here. This is in the middle of the night. They meet armed resistance. It takes 20 minutes to make it to the third floor. They don't know if the Pakistani military is going to be closing in, is going to impede their departure. Every second counts, and it would compromise the mission to do anything other than use lethal force against bin Laden and get him out as quickly as possible.
All right.
So even under a restrictive view, it's clearly lawful.
Okay, Walter, I'll speak for the entire Supreme Court. You win that argument 9-0. So far, you're way ahead. Now I'm going to push you a little bit. How about the drone attacks? Does it get a little tougher? We're sending drones into Pakistan Pakistan, and there the targets are not nearly so well identified. We're dealing with people much lower down, either in al-Qaeda or the Taliban. Not so clear that they are in these senior positions. Is there any question there that we're pushing the U.S. prohibition on assassination?
I don't think so. You were entitled to... The assassination ban is about targeting governmental leaders for a political objective. We are going against a command and control structure in Pakistan and in Afghanistan of people who have made no hesitation to say that they are wanting to plot activities against the United States. There's a policy judgment to be made about how much you want to risk the loss of life of civilians or non-combatants, how careful you ought to be. Those are operational policy decisions, not decisions about the lawfulness of the use of military force.
All right, I want to turn to David Gergen, who's been right at the center of those operational decisions in the Oval Office with multiple presidents when these decisions are made. First, does the president, when he's determining what the policy, what to do here, do you consider the legality, or do you just say, we're going to get bin Laden, we'll worry about the legal mess thereafter, call the lawyers in once we're done?
Sure, and President Clinton, the first thing he would have said was call Walter Dellinger and ask him, because he's the guy who's going to know. And so, that would have been the right answer. Walter is was a Solicitor General, is a wonderful constitutional scholar, and Elliot, you've been a heavyoweight in the law as well. So I'm not going to argue that, but a president would normally do that, yes. But the president would also ask a moral question: is it right, in effect? And I think that the answer comes to the same place. And that is, this is a man who declared war on the United States. He was a combatant. He said that he would never be taken alive. He gave indications that he would have explosives on him. And in the middle of the night, under those circumstances, it seems to me morally justified, rooted in some sense of natural law, that you could take him out. And I think it would be a pretty open and shut case, just as we did with Admiral Yamamoto during the Second World War, after he was the mastermind of the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Right. You know, the historical analogy there that I think most people have forgotten. I want to now push you a little bit, David, because move to Libya. I don't want to move across the geographic world too quickly, but move to Libya, where we bombed Libya and Gaddafi in 1986, I believe it was. Then thereafter, we moved to diplomatic recognition. We tried to bring him into the orbit of the world, of the League of Nations, and not literally the League, but then those who abide by international law. And now we're back to bombing his headquarters in Tripoli again, killing parts of his members of his family. Does this make sense to you, either operationally, morally, or legally?
I think this is a lot more problematic. We went in on a basis of the UN mandate, and that was all about defensive action. You can make, I think, an argument, but it's a very strained argument, that would include trying to take out Gaddafi. But it does seem to me Gaddafi is a very different case. I'd be interested in hearing Walter's view on it. But it's a very different case.
Yeah, Walter, I'm leaving. Excuse me, I'm sorry, David. Walter, I'm leaving the toughest question for you. You justify the U.S. government's participation through NATO in the bombing of Gaddafi's family, arguably targeting Gaddafi himself. Is that within the constraints of either the UN resolution or U.S. law as you understand it?
Well, David is correct that Libya is a more problematic case. But if there is authority to use lethal force against Gaddafi's troops on the ground in order to protect civilians in Benghazi, then it clearly is within lawful authority to go after the command and control center in Gaddafi's compound. Now, as a matter of policy, you want to minimize civilian damage, and it's worth noting, as David does on the moral calculus about bin Laden, that the president chose the more difficult option. Instead of dropping a 2-ton bomb, which would have killed everybody in the compound, men, women, and children, he chose a more difficult option in part to avoid the loss of unnecessary life. So we've had that moral calculus. I think Libya is a more complicated case, but if you can go after the troops, you can go after the commander.
Walter,
but if he were in a house, Walter, if he were in a house somewhere, not in a command and control center, that would be a very difficult one to justify. If Gaddafi was in a house somewhere?
Well, as a matter of policy, but as long as he is the effective commander, and we have every reason to believe that he was. There certainly has been no retirement party for bin Laden by al-Qaeda. So we have every reason to believe he's still in command and control. And no matter where he is, I think you can go after him. As a matter of policy and humaneness, you may want to minimize collateral damage, loss of life to civilians, and they did that in this case.
David, I want to end with you a question that Walter raised quite properly. The fact that President Obama had a choice. He could have dropped a big bomb on bin Laden's house. Instead, we went in, minimized the loss of life elsewhere. One of the other reasons to go in as we did, a bomb would have destroyed everybody without any proof that bin Laden, in fact, was dead. Now the raging debate, should the president release photos to eliminate any possible doubt that bin Laden is dead? What do you think?
I think it's a very hard call, and one thing we've learned about this president, he's extremely judicious, and he must have weighed this very carefully, and I trust his judgment at the end of the day. If he thought that this actually would be a threat to U.S. national security, that you would find riots around the world, it would make him more of a martyr, I think and it came down that way, I would support that. The other interesting part of this, Elliot, is it's true in Pakistan there's some, people are protesting he's not dead and that sort of thing, even as they protest us taking him out. But the truth is most of the world thinks he's dead. And so I don't think the president had a great weight on his shoulders to make that case. And I think that led him to make the decision, okay, in this case, why release this and have people rally and the gruesome pictures and everything else.
All right, Walter Dellinger, David Gergen, thank you both for being here. Got to say, agree with just about everything both of you said. Up next, Edie Hill talks to a man who pioneered the kind of special ops unit that took down bin Laden. We'll be right back.